Today on the Daily Dose, the Huey's role in the Vietnam helicopter war. For most American combat personnel who served in Vietnam, the classic image of the helicopter war was the Huey Bell UH-1D. The Huey was ready to back troops up, insert or extract them from hot zones, or rush the wounded to field hospitals. While 11 different types of helicopters were deployed during the Vietnam War, the Huey became an indispensable asset in the jungle war against the Viet Cong, since its vertical takeoff and landing capabilities allowed soldiers to be rushed into dense jungles, valleys, or hilltops. Their ability to swiftly insert or extract troops from jungle battlefields became standard practice for war in Southeast Asia, while the Huey's ability to evacuate the wounded and swiftly convey them to medical facilities proved to be the difference between life and death for tens of thousands of casualties. First introduced in 1959, the Huey was built by Bell Helicopter to meet a 1952 U.S. Army requirement for a medical evacuation and utility helicopter for an increasingly likely conflict in Southeast Asia. The Huey was the first turbine-powered helicopter built for the U.S. military, with more than 16,000 produced since 1960, while over 7,000 were deployed during the Vietnam War. Crewed by 1 to 4 servicemen, the Huey has a maximum takeoff weight of 9,500 pounds, with a flight capacity of 14 troops or 6 occupied stretchers. Packed with a maximum airspeed of 135 miles an hour, the Huey offers a range of 315 miles at a cruising speed of 125 miles an hour, with a service ceiling of 19,390 feet, dependent on factors such as weight and air temperature. The Huey also touts a dizzying rate of climb of 1,755 feet per minute. When communist-manned 12.7mm ground-based machine guns came on scene, known by American helicopter crews as 51 calibers, Hueys were mounted with a counter-arsenal of heavy machine guns until the M60 became the standard helicopter door armament on most Vietnam-era slicks, which first employed a swivel mount on top of a fixed pintle mount. As the war progressed, door gunners employed bungee cords to suspend and retain their M60s, which allowed for increased firing angles as well as easier and faster accessibility. A total of 1,925 Hueys were lost in combat, while an additional 1,380 were lost in operational accidents, making the Bell UH-1D Huey one of the most critical assets over the jungles of Southeast Asia.
The Ho Chi Minh Trail. During the Vietnam War, the Ho Chi Minh Trail was a network of roads that ran from communist North Vietnam to American-backed South Vietnam, transecting the kingdoms of Laos and Cambodia in a sparsely populated mountainous region of triple canopy jungle and dense tropical rainforest. Named La Piste de Ho Chi Minh by French journalists during the First Indochina War, construction of a north-south road network began in July of 1959, used to supply manpower and materiel to North Vietnamese forces fighting in the south. By mid-1960, analysts from the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency estimated that during the Laotian dry season, North Vietnamese soldiers and volunteers alike were moving 30 trucks a day over the trail, which far exceeded the estimates of U.S. war planners in Saigon, leading to Operation Barrel Roll beginning in mid-December 1964, which was the first systematic bombing of the Ho Chi Minh Trail by the U.S. Air Force. As the American press caught wind of air attacks into a widening theater beyond Vietnam's borders, the U.S. State Department defended the controversial raids as authorized by powers granted to President Lyndon Baines Johnson under the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution signed in August of 1964. Leading to the commencement of Operation Rolling Thunder on March 20, 1965, followed by Operation Steel Tiger. By year's end, the number of trail-focused bombing sorties flown by the Americans had expanded from 20 a month to over 1,000, while by 1969, records indicate that some 433,000 tons of ordnance fell on Laos alone. The ever-increasing frequency of military raids into the neutral kingdoms of Laos and Cambodia did much to escalate the anti-war movement back home and abroad, which in the end encouraged LBJ not to seek a second term in office, eventually leading to the Paris Peace Accords and the fall of Saigon in 1975, which handed victory to the Communist North. According to the U.S. National Security Agency's official history of the Vietnam War, the Ho Chi Minh Trail was one of the greatest achievements in military engineering of the 20th century, despite the single most intensive air interdiction campaign in military history, making the Ho Chi Minh Trail a vital asset in the North's eventual victory in the Vietnam War.
Donut Dollies and the Vietnam War. Gaining their nickname from World War II in Korea, from February 1962 to March of 1973, Donut Dollies were deployed into Vietnam to provide support and a sympathetic ear for millions of U.S. servicemen who were hungry for news from back home, not to mention the chance to spend quality time with the girl next door. Selfless, brave, and resilient, armed only with their smile and bubbly personalities, the American Red Cross Donut Dollies traveled in pairs by helicopter, jeeps, and half-tracks, logging some 2 million miles into remote fire bases where they brought much-needed warmth to soldiers counting down to the day when their year of service was finally over. During the height of the Vietnam War, over 600 young women responded to somewhat ambiguous Red Cross ads, seeking qualified young women willing to serve 1 year overseas. To be considered for the job, standards for acceptance were higher than those of the military, requiring a woman to be 21 years of age, college-educated, replete with letters of recommendation, and an outstanding personality, for, according to Red Cross advertisements, a job that requires a capacity for hard work under less than ideal conditions. After only 2 weeks of training in Washington, D.C., the women shipped off for Vietnam in their signature pale blue outfits, manning recreation centers while visiting the wounded in evac hospitals throughout South Vietnam. Yet no one appreciated the presence of Donut Dollies more than troops stationed at remote fire bases in country, where they spent much-needed time with wholesome American women, talking about home or sports or music with fresh-faced beauties in ponytails, makeup, and a hint of perfume, helping many servicemen catch a moment's break from the harsh realities of war. Sometimes sleeping in bunkers under incoming mortar and sniper fire, Donut Dollies witnessed firsthand some of the worst tragedies of life in country, leaving many Vietnam veterans, even 5 decades after the war's unceremonious end, with fond memories and deep respect for the Donut Dollies that brought moments of sunlight to their darkest days as fighting men. Ho Chi Minh. Born in 1890 Central Vietnam, as a young man, Ho Chi Minh found work as a chef on a French steamer, spending several years traveling to Africa, the United States, and Europe, settling in France by 1919, where he organized a group of Vietnamese expats to petition delegates at the Versailles Peace Conference for improved human rights under Vietnam's French imperialist overlords in Southeast Asia. Inspired by Vladimir Lenin's Bolshevik Revolution, Minh joined the Communist Party in 1920, founding the Hong Kong-based Indochinese Communist Party in 1930, before traveling to Russia, Brussels, Paris, and Thailand as a representative for an international communist organization. During World War II, Minh returned to Vietnam, organizing the Viet Minh Party, or League for the Independence of Vietnam. Attempting to seek financial aid from China, Minh was thrown into prison for 18 months by Chiang Kai-shek's anti-communist government. Following Japan's surrender and withdrawal from Vietnam in 1945, Viet Minh forces seized the northern city of Hanoi, where Minh was declared president of the new democratic state of Vietnam. War would break out in late 1946 after a French cruiser opened fire on the town of Haiphong, leading to years of guerrilla-style warfare during the First Indochina War, until France's decisive loss at the 1954 Battle of Dien Bien Phu. The Americans were next in the Cold War battle against communist expansionism, sending the first aid and military troops into South Vietnam by late 1961. Known as Uncle Ho to his people, after Minh stepped down as Party Secretary General to take on more war planning behind-the-scenes activities, when American airstrikes escalated substantially in 1965 and 66, Minh sent an open letter to the people of Vietnam, stating that nothing is as dear to the heart of the Vietnamese as independence and liberation, which soon became the motto for the North Vietnamese cause. He passed away from a heart attack on September 2, 1969, 4.5 years before the fall of Saigon, making Ho Chi Minh an essential figure in Vietnam's push for independence. Napalm in the Vietnam War. During the First World War, flamethrowers spewed ignited gasoline on enemy combatants, which proved to be of minimal effectiveness since gasoline burned out quickly. To remedy the deficiency, the U.S. Chemical Warfare Service added rubber to gasoline, producing a jelly-like mixture that burned longer and stuck to enemy combatants with more fatal consequences. But when rubber became a scarce commodity during World War II, particularly in the Pacific, a team of Harvard chemists led by Louis Fieser developed a mix of naphthenic and palmitic acids, creating a hideous yet highly effective jellied liquid that burned at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit and stuck to human skin like glue, at the same time creating suffocating carbon monoxide gas, much like Zyklon B, which was the Nazis' gas of choice for exterminating Jews and political dissidents in World War II concentration camps. In 1965, the Dow Company, best known for their kitchen wonder product Saran Wrap, began making napalm in mass quantities for use in the Vietnam War, raising chemical warfare to new heights of inhumanity. Yet despite its obvious cruelty, napalm proved to be a highly effective weapon. From 1963 to 1973, 388,000 tons of napalm was dropped on Vietnam, compared to 32,357 tons used during the Korean War, and a mere 16,500 tons used in World War II, covering victims both civilian and military, with a viscous magma the consistency of tar, causing burn wounds generally too great for a victim to survive. First deployed during the early years of the Vietnam War in flamethrowers and flamethrowing tanks, as the war dragged on, U.S. war planners switched to carpet bombing that could leave an area as large as 2,500 square yards engulfed in unquenchable fire. Accuracy, however, proved to be an elusive objective, causing untold casualties to civilian populations in Vietnam, at the same time creating one of the most impactful weapons in the history of psychological warfare. As media coverage of the Vietnam War intensified in the United States, napalm became a rallying point for anti-war protesters, calling for a boycott of the Dow Company beginning as early as 1966. After the fall of Saigon in 1975, 5 years later, the United Nations declared the use of napalm against concentrations of civilians a war crime, making napalm one of the worst inhumanities of chemical warfare.
You smell that? Napalm, son! Nothing else in the world smells like that! I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
Cobra's role in the Vietnam War. Early experience in Vietnam persuaded the U.S. Army that the Bell UH-1 transport Huey needed an air escort, prompting Bell Helicopter to step in with the company-funded Model 209 gunship development of the Huey. The new helicopter retained the dynamic systems of the UH-1 Huey models, but married these to an exceptionally slim fuselage that seated just 2 crew members in tandem, with the weapon officer below and forward of the pilot for the best possible field of vision. The Huey Cobra, or Snake, as the Bell AH-1 became known, was rushed into production and service, and the helicopters were delivered into Southeast Asia on small transports for local assembly and rapid deployment to units stationed in South Vietnam. The Cobra also pioneered a new concept of armament, with a gun turret under the chin controlled by the weapon officer and 4 hardpoints under the stubbed wings for gun pods and rocket launchers controlled by either crew member. Both the weapon officer and the pilot possessed control capabilities of the aircraft, should one or the other become wounded during combat. The Cobra was designed to escort troop-carrying UH-1 Hueys while using its superior airspeed to soften up landing zones prior to troop insertions. The Cobra was also instrumental in supplying close ground support to pin down American GIs in hot zones, where their lethal firepower could be called in by ground force commanders, delivering quick and highly accurate cover fire and enemy eradication. By using the established technology of the day, the Cobra was a simply maintained attack helicopter augmented by an easy-access engine hold, which allowed for routine maintenance procedures in the field. The Cobra's increased airspeed, maneuverability, and rate of climb, combined with a greatly reduced aerodynamic drag associated with its larger Huey cousin, permitting Cobra pilots to arrive over targets in advance of larger slicks, while engaging the enemy for longer periods of time and with larger loads of ordnance. After catastrophic anti-aircraft losses to American helicopters during the 1971 Lam Son offensive in Laos, Cobra pilots pivoted tactics to what became known as Map of the Earth low-altitude terrain following, which significantly reduced their exposure to inbound enemy fire. Combined with the Cobra's high airspeed and flight performance characteristics, Cobra pilots further developed a return-to-target maneuver, which became the helicopter's equivalent to fixed-wing acrobatics, making the Huey Cobra one of the greatest air assets ever deployed during the Vietnam War.
The Spring Offensive of 1975. Known in the Communist North as the Ho Chi Minh Campaign, the People's Army of Vietnam, or PAVN, began their spring offensive into the South on March 10, 1975, capturing the key central highland city of Buôn Ma Thuột by March 18th, in a preemptive push south in advance of a second offensive planned for early 1976. Instead, American and South Vietnamese military leaders quickly ascertained that they were no longer capable of defending the entirety of South Vietnam, leading to a pullback from the Central Highlands that caused civilian refugees to come under fire as they fled a lone highway toward the coast. From a combatant standpoint, a well-led and aggressive PAVN took advantage of the South's failing command and control, leading to the all-out rout and destruction of the majority of South Vietnamese forces in the highlands. In response to the pullback and rout, the United States sat on their hands. As the South's Army of the Republic of Vietnam, or ARVN, devolved into a disorderly and panicked withdrawal, they abandoned Kon Tum and Pleiku as they fled deeper south, leading the North Vietnamese to press their attack from the west and the north, capturing Quang Tri, Huey, and Da Nang in a rapid succession of coastal offensives. Caught off guard by the ARVN's unexpected collapse, North Vietnamese military leaders transferred the bulk of its northern troops more than 350 miles to the south, in an all-out push to win the war, in time for a posthumous celebration of Ho Chi Minh's birthday. In response, splintered South Vietnamese forces regrouped in defense of the capital, despite a near-total collapse of political and military will from top South Vietnamese leaders. After North Vietnamese forces captured Tan Son Airport on April 28th, a day later, the order came down to evacuate American nationals and South Vietnamese sympathizers, who were airlifted from the walled American embassy compound to the American aircraft carriers Hancock and Midway, waiting some 40 miles offshore, ferried by a dedicated task force of some 80 American helicopters. On April 30th, as the last U.S. Marines took to the rooftop of the embassy in hopes of their own Hail Mary evacuation, North Vietnamese tanks and troop carriers stormed into the city, leading to the fall of Saigon and a long overdue end to the Vietnam War. Today in the Daily Dose, Agent Orange. In a region steeped with junglous terrain, from 1961 to 1971, the U.S. military implemented an aggressive chemical warfare campaign known as Operation Ranch Hand, dispersing some 20 million gallons of herbicides across more than 4.5 million acres of Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, intended to destroy forest cover and food crops that concealed and fed enemy combatants. Only you can prevent a forest, soldiers joked as a twist on the Smokey the Bear firefighting campaign back home, as they sprayed herbicides like Agent Orange from planes, trucks, and hand sprayers, all without protective measures for the soldiers involved. While Agent Orange proved highly effective in causing jungle plants to lose their leaves and die, the agent also delivered deadly amounts of a dioxin known as TCDD, introducing immediate and long-term consequences as the compound leached into soil and river sediments, at the same time accumulating in the fatty tissues of fish, birds, and other animals consumed by humans. The results proved devastating to American troops and locals alike, causing liver problems, a severe acne-like skin disease known as chloracne, muscular dysfunction, hormone disruptions, spina bifida and other birth defects in newborns, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, immune suppression leading to a wide range of cancers, nervous disorders, and miscarriages. Over the years following the end of the Vietnam War, a number of class action lawsuits have been filed on behalf of veterans who were exposed to Agent Orange during their service in Vietnam, while in 1991, President George H.W. Bush signed the Agent Orange Act, which helped the VA healthcare system classify the treatment of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, soft tissue sarcomas, and chloracne to be treated and paid for as a direct result of military service during the war years in Southeast Asia. As for the nation of Vietnam, health officials report more than 400,000 deaths caused by exposure to Agent Orange, while some 2 million people have suffered from the same deadly ailments reported by Vietnam veterans. To further the tragedy, nearly 500,000 Vietnamese children have been born with serious birth defects attributed to Operation Ranch Hand, making Agent Orange yet another deadly outcome of the Vietnam War. And there you have it, Agent Orange, today in the Daily Dose. If you like learning something new every day, subscribe to the Daily Dose on YouTube or sign up for emails at dailydosenow.com.